Hello, welcome to episode 14, I believe. Is that correct, Brad?
It is
14
episode 14, believe it or not.
of Drawing Me Out with Bill Willingham. I am apparently stuck playing the part of Bill Willingham, uh, but it could be worse. Brad has to be Brad. Say hello, Brad.
Wow.
I know.
That is cold. Well, I'm
Cold.
glad to be here.
All right. We will be continuing today our series on writing. And once again, the caveat, the disclaimer, that this is not a comprehensive lesson on writing. I couldn't teach a comprehensive lesson on writing to save my life, uh, even if I was allowed to write it out. What it is things that I've learned, things that have helped me in my writing career, and will perhaps help you, which is almost as good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a good
So,
placeholder.
pardon me?
I said it's a good placeholder.
Yeah.
It'll get them through.
Placeholder. Yes, that's what we provide with these videos. Nice placeholders. So here we go. We were talking recently about where do you get your ideas, and we talked about how the ideas are of no value unless they are executed ideas. But now we can get into some of the details, the nitty gritty. I've threatened over a couple of videos to eventually do something on naming of characters, and this time we're going to do it. So this episode is about naming your characters. And as always, Brad Tomte is here with me to engage in the conversation. Now,
So what? I'll ask the first question for you.
Sure.
I'm probably derailing your train of thought.
No.
What thought process goes into character naming / development, say based on the type of world you want to write?
Well, the main thought, the overriding thought, is I want a character that I will like the name of. Not necessarily like in a way that like, oh, I wish I knew some more Daves. I don't have enough Daves in my life. I'd like to go get some Daves. I have plenty of Howards. Maybe I can trade some Howards in on some Daves. It's not that. It is more this fits. This fits kind of what I nebulously had in mind when I nebulously started to build this character. Naming is pretty much the first thing with me. It precedes all sorts of. I don't even care what the character looks like at this point. The name is important, more important. Some of the things to get through before we go through my very personal rules on naming is if you're going to write a story, you want your character names to be different from each other. This is a visual problem more than an oral. I mean, names are said out loud, and yet most of your readers are not pronouncing the words out loud as they read them. They're reading them silently. So the visual kick is most important, and visual stumbling blocks are the most vital to avoid. As a general rule, here's some things that work. Your first letter is the most important. The first letter of whatever name you're going to most often call your characters by. V, if you have a Victor, don't also have his best friend named Vasily and their best girl named Veronica. Because the V is that first letter visual kick that clicks the reminder in your mind, like, okay, yeah, I know who that is. It's one of the things as a writer is you want your reader to be able to flow with the story and not constantly be stumbling over stumbling blocks, like trying to remember, now who is this again. So try not to have too many characters with the same first name. First letter. The second letter isn't as important or isn't as unique. If you have a character named Sam starts with an S, and a character named Scam, and then one named Spam, and then one named whatever. That second letter doesn't alter things enough to make them good different names for different characters. The first letter, though, if you have a character named Sam and you have a character named Bam, I don't know why you would have a character named Bam unless you're writing a revival of the Flintstones, but let's roll with that. Those actually look visually different enough when you read them. B, the S, they're two different. A reader could keep those two characters easily separate in his or her mind. The first syllable is the next important. Samwise and Samwell, I keep getting confused. Samwise is the companion character in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Samwell is the companion character in the Game of Thrones books. Every time I see Samwell in the Game of Thrones books, for example, I have to stop and remind myself, oh no, that is actually a different name. He didn't just grab so evocative a name as Samwise and just take it into his story. He made it a little different. But I have to stop and remind myself. So maybe the similarity of first syllables there, especially since the second syllables in each of those names are so close, maybe that wasn't the best choice. Your characters can have interesting nicknames. Some of the obvious ones are the so-called ironic, goes against describing what they really are. Tiny as the nickname for a big guy. That's probably overused, but there's an example. Mad Dog as the nickname for a passive nebbish. You can have evocative nicknames that imply there's a story behind it. We meet a character's best friend, and his name is Barf. Now, that's not a great hero name, but you know, kind of goofy companion, just perfect. You know, there's a story behind how did he get the name Barf?
Somewhere in high school, there was a bet that was lost.
Yep. Yeah. You know, there's a great story, and you needn't tell the story. You just need to let the readers know, and you don't have to work hard to do it, that there is a story. What if the character's name is Window? Is there did he fall out of a window at some point? Does he have a wonderful outlook in the world? It's like, that's a bad story. But what if, he's a hero among his group because of that time that he was seen coming out of Betty's bedroom window, just as Betty's father, who also happens to be the local police captain, was coming home through the front door. Now, see, there's a story. He's got the name Window, maybe even Rear Window, whatever, and it's a heroic name. So if you're going to use nicknames, imply that there's a story, but you don't need to tell the story. One of my favorite nicknames in a science fiction book, his name was Stringer, and the culture allowed several ways that he might have gotten that name, but the author never specified, and I was fine with that. The nice thing is when Stringer showed up, you didn't confuse him with any other character. Oddly spelled names are readers' stumbling blocks.
Oddly spelled versions of regular names or unique names that are oddly spelled.
Like,
okay.
We're sort of getting used to Brian with a Y, maybe an O instead of, so it's kind of like Byron, but with an R, a misplaced R. Remember that your readers are seeing these things visually first, and if they have to stop to decode them each time, you may have a problem. One example, Geaux, pronounced Joe. If there's any way you could possibly just name the guy Joe, please do that instead. I know there's a desire to be exotic in some of the things you're doing, but is the need to be exotic more important, more compelling than the need for the reader not to fall down and have to pick himself up and get back into the story every single time they encounter that name? Variations on a common name can work. Remember, we're dealing visually here, so it adds kind of an eye punch to single out an important character. One example I have is Kelvin rather than Kevin. Kelvin was actually a name too from our history, just not very common anymore. Kevin, it's okay name, but if your main character's named Kelvin, oh, there's something more interesting about him. You better make him interesting. Let's get to my, let's count them. I think I've got 7 personal go-to places for naming my characters. The first, I'm sorry, what?
No, I was going to say, you've got 7 places, like methods that you use, or literal,
Yes.
like reference materials?
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. There, some are reference materials, some are methods.
Okay.
First and foremost is my favorite character naming book. It's called, succinctly enough, the Character Naming Source Book. 2nd edition I have. I wonder if there's new editions. It's by Sherilyn Kenyon. It's published by Writer's Digest Books, and I believe it is still available. But it is a wonderful book, and I'll tell you why. It gives common names for many, many, many cultures. Do you need a Greek name? You got it. You need an Italian name, females, males, fine. If you need a name from Arthurian folklore, we've got a list of that. You got Portuguese, you got Scandinavian, but not just Scandinavian. You want to go Old Norse because you're writing a story based in Asgard. Well, there it is. Teutonic, Welsh, lists of top 5 names in different years, top 10 names, etc. Native American. The next thing that is very important to me is that you get the meaning behind every name. And as a personal bugaboo to me, I don't like naming characters if I don't know the meaning of their name. If their name means the opposite of what I want their qualities to be, I want to know that. I'm not saying that disqualifies them because, once again, we can go ironic. We can say his name is Tiny even though he's a big guy. But I want to know. I want to know what qualities the name has, and whether or not that should impact what qualities the character has. If not, you get nothing else from this other than picking up the source book, which you can order through Amazon. And Brad, we should probably make this our what do we call it? The go-to.
It's our Amazon affiliate link of the week, and if it is available on Amazon, it definitely will be.
Another place I love to go for names, because the problem with looking up names like this is that you tend to fixate on the ones you kind of like, you go to. I like to be surprised by odd names. And one of the places I've found to get exposed to a lot of names that I just didn't know were names are the end credits of films, especially more modern films where they just roll so many credits for so many positions. In the olden days, they credited mostly just the head of departments, like the head of the makeup department, the head of the special effects department, whatever. Nowadays, if you did something on the film in the final role, you're going to be named, and some of those names for any film are from people all around the world, because films are made by different groups all around the world now. So it's a wonderful spot. I discovered this while watching just end credits. I let end credits roll. Um, I feel an obligation to try and watch the credits if I can of a movie, because these people, they did the work. They should get their moment. And I started noticing, oh, that's an interestingly odd name, and then I would write it down. Now I go
And
to
that's
it.
something you mentioned last time too, is keeping notebooks around for that purpose.
We
So if
will
you are sitting around watching those movies, keep that notebook handy.
always have something handy to write down on. Number 3 of my personal rules: no names that are too on the nose, unless you're doing an allegory. If you're in the allegory end of the fantasy realm, what I mean by this is, if the protagonist of your new novel is named Shadow, then you're indicating to your readership that this is some kind of allegorical, weird, whatever kind of stuff, unless there's just a damn good reason, his name is Shadow. if his name is Pilgrim and he's on a quest, okay. For a nice little allegory, okay, although that's been done. If it's too much on the nose, if your killer's name is Killer and your hero's name is Hero, maybe maybe dig a little deeper. Number 4, the problem with borrowing really famous names. If you decide to name one of your important characters after someone famous and well known, that is going to stick out every time. Let me give you an example. Paul Chadwick, who wrote and drew a long running comic series called Concrete, very well done, wonderfully written, just a masterful story. But he named his main character Ron Lithgow, very close to John Lithgow, the famous actor, who was really famous at the time, now still well known. The problem with rereading Concrete is that I stumble over that name and am taken out of the story every single time I encounter it. I know what you want to do is you kind of like you want to borrow some of that fame. It's like he's this kind of a character, therefore I'm using this name. It's evocative to me. Maybe he's a favorite actor of mine. The problem is you want your story to become famous on its own. You want your character's name to be the one that people think of as like, well, yeah, we can't use that name anymore. It's too famous because of this. Lithgow, little too take you out of the story. Number 5, one of my favorite, especially with fantasy type names. Fantasy names have to be evocative of common names we know, but different. For example, names of elves. I break out the Scrabble tiles. You can see the little letters and stuff like that. So I can start with a name I like and then sub out, as you can see, until I get a kind of alien sounding name that is similar to that. One of my favorite names that I was going to use in a story someday is Sheridan. I always thought it was just a great name, and I was going to use it someday. But for this particular character, he was going to be an elf in a different world. Sheridan is too closely linked to our history to work as kind of an alien name. So I swapped out tiles, and pretty soon I came up with the name Carradine, which does sound like, yeah, that Tolkien could have even come up with that one. So that's how we named it. I go to the Scrabble tiles a lot if I am doing something in the science fiction realm that is far enough into the future to where we don't want just normal sounding names by today's standards.
Steve, the space explorer.
Steve the Space Explorer, although, maybe Steve will still be around. Number 6, which Brad brought up, is keep a notebook. I keep notebooks for all sorts of things, good lines, good descriptions, good story ideas. And one notebook, you can see, specifically for names. I collect names. Anytime I encounter a good name, I will write it down on something, but eventually it'll work its way into one of my good name notebooks. And number 7, final one, is just pay attention. Anytime I meet someone with an interesting name, meaning one I hadn't heard before, I ask her, what does your name mean? About 40% of the time, he or she doesn't know. The rest of the time, they do. And sometimes you get really lucky. Like my optometrist in Vermont, when I was living there, when it was clear I needed glasses, his name was Dr. Akistapache. And it was such an interesting name that I asked him, what does Akistapache mean? And he goes, well, it's Italian for acquire peace. Akista, acquire, pace, peace. I thought, well, that's a wonderful name. A couple of years later, when I needed a name for an Italian mobster, I remembered that because I wrote it down. And he became the mobster in my run on Robin, called Mr. Akista, an Italian name that means acquire. And what a wonderful name for a mobster is that his name actually means acquire, which is something
Awesome. Yep.
apparently they like to do. So pay attention when people tell you their names. If it's a good and interesting one, talk to them about it, and then write it down. Oh, there were so many great conversations I had where someone told me a wonderful name, and I thought I'd remember it, and now I don't. I remember forgetting so many good names. And, my life would suddenly finally make sense and have true meaning if only I could remember those names that I'd forgotten because I didn't write it down. Anyway, that's my thoughts on naming characters. Brad, do you have anything to add or subtract?
No, that's pretty straightforward. In the discussion this time, I want everyone to talk about whether they know what their own name, first or last, means without having to look it up. Have you ever considered that of your own name or those around you? Let us know in the discussion below.
Yeah, by the way, my name, Bill. William means war helmet. And it's Germanic, so I guess it means German war helmet.
There you go. Mine is Bradley, and my last name, Tomty. It's actually Broad Meadow and Wide Open Field. Look at that.
So it's a redundancy.
I am a redundancy. I am.
Broad meadow, wide open field. All right. With that, I think we're out of time.
Very good.
Would you like
Yeah,
to
as always, just give us a like, a share, a subscribe, ring the bell, talk in the description below or the discussion below. Let us know that you're listening and you're digging the content.
All right. And next time, since we've got our characters named, we're going to start creating the characters, starting with our protagonist. But that's next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. We're rolling.
We are.